Hostin's obsession with race gets thrown back in her face. Today's video comes to us from Sunny Hostin. Sounds like a town. We're in Sunny Hostin. She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe.
No, it's interesting because I think Sunny is very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured.
Right.
You know, that's sort of, I think the other ones, there's a couple of the other ones, don't have to name any names, who are just very dull-minded. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart, but captured.
Sure, I think.
Sunny Hostin walked in expecting a calm debate, but Joe Rogan and Rogan Gutfeld turned it into a full-on WrestleMania clash of egos. One moment she was lecturing, the next she was hit with blunt truths, sarcastic jabs, and clean logic shots. Rogan hit hard with straight facts, while Gutfeld sliced in with jokes sharp enough to cut through the view script. What set off this fiery takedown? She picked the wrong battle, and the worst possible opponents.
Yet people think things are funny because they don't think about the person they're making fun of. You and I are both guilty of doing that.
Of course.
As comics.
Absolutely.
But that one was like particularly like,
you're like, wow.
Rough.
Well, just, it was started to view and then they have all these ones. They're like,
People have to wonder, where does Sunny Hostin get her opinions? Like you said, it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say on The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there. She's not very bright. But the problem with her is that she went full racist. She injected skin color into a fairly generic behavior seen in...
Sunny Hostin seemed to think she was still on The View, not walking straight into the Thunderdome. Between sipping lattes and handing out moral superiority like party favors, she made the worst move possible by taking a swing at Joe Rogan. Big mistake. Huge. That's like strolling into a jiu-jitsu dojo wearing a shirt that screams, "Please toss me," with a latte in one hand and your own op-ed in the other. She probably thought she was delivering a righteous smackdown, backed by an audience trained to clap at anything with a mic and a stage.
Worried about losing your job, and you're worried about podcasts taking over, and who's the source of news, and we said Donald Trump was Hitler, but half the country disagreed with us, and he won, and this is and Joe Rogan believes in dragons!
But then, as if fate had a twisted sense of humor darker than Gutfeld's punchlines, Rogan Gutfeld charged in like a WWE fighter, swinging a folding chair made of sarcasm and wearing an imaginary belt labeled Smugness Slayer. This wasn't just a comeback, it was a live tag team demolition. Sunny came armed with bullet points and outrage. Rogan fired back with pure logic. Gutfeld unloaded ruthless humor. And what followed wasn't a debate at all. It was a roast so savage even the teleprompter looked like it needed therapy.
Sausage maker Johnsonville is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage for possible contamination with plastic fibers. Fortunately, authorities were able to track all 42,000 pounds to a single location in New York City.
Sunny came out swinging with her trademark sanctimony, but it was sent right back, gift-wrapped in humiliation and stamped return to sender. It started with one of her classic rants, the kind soaked in self-righteousness and coated with a thin academic glaze. Toss in a little elitist flair and top it off with the intellectual version of tofu. It looks filling at first, but once it's over, you're left starving for anything real.
More time to talk. And I thought Will Smith wouldn't let a black man finish. If her IQ was half as high as her smugness, she'd be Einstein.
It was the kind of monologue that made you wonder if she was trying to save civilization or just auditioning for a TED Talk nobody asked for. She aimed straight at Rogan, her words loosely wrapped in sanctimony, probably picturing herself toppling the patriarchy or rescuing democracy from men in flannel shirts daring to talk about free speech on Spotify. In her mind, this was heroism in heels, a bold stand against independent thought, a rally cry perfectly tuned for the brunch crowd. But reality had other plans. Instead of applause or approving nods, she ran straight into a brutal double-team clapback. Rogan calmly stepped in with Costco-sized logic, while Gutfeld lit up the room with flamethrower jokes so sharp they practically scorched the studio floor. They didn't just respond to her points, they took them apart. Like two guys realizing the table they're fixing is made of cardboard and bad takes. Joe didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look stressed. He leaned back like a king in his podcast chair and did what he does best, pulling out logic like a pocket knife at a balloon party. He poked holes, sliced contradictions, and delivered it all with the relaxed calm of someone peeling an orange while casually lecturing on philosophy.
And frankly, that show, you want to talk about a show that set women back, is The View. You want to talk about that show. If the CIA is engineering, Antifa and fucking the Capitol riot, some crazy misogynist engineered The View, because there's nothing worse than The View. In terms of there are so many brilliant women out there. None of them are on The View. None of them have gone near the set of The View. I mean, they have brought in the lowest tier of the, what is it, the Y chromosome?
No, double
The
X.
Okay.
Double X.
This wasn't just a rebuttal. It was a full-on autopsy of her entire argument, and the only thing missing was a chalk outline showing where Sunny's take finally collapsed. Greg Gutfeld didn't even pretend her point deserved serious attention. He laughed his way through it like someone handed him a rejected Hallmark script written in crayon. He turned her lecture into a roast so savage even the microphone seemed to pull back in self-defense. His weapon of choice was razor-sharp sarcasm, paired with that signature Gutfeld smirk that clearly said, "I'm not mad, I'm just shocked you thought this would work." And the audience? They weren't just entertained. They devoured every second and wanted more. Clips of the verbal beatdown spread online faster than Sunny's publicist could say, "That's not what she meant." Within hours, social media lit up like a Christmas tree in July, with Rogan supporters and Gutfeld fans piling on, dropping comments like, "She walked right into that," and "Did she just get suplexed on live TV?" But let's rewind, because the painfully awkward buildup deserves its moment. Sunny's starting point wasn't just off, it was a spectacular crash landing into irrelevance. She tried to brand Rogan as dangerous, divisive, and completely out of touch, which is rich coming from a co-host on a show that's built a career on yelling at its own audience, like angry parents shocked their kid dared to vote third party.
Did you watch the whole thing or just the parts that I sent you?
I watched it. Obviously, just the parts that you said. Did I watch a whole episode of The View?
No woman can do that unless you're stupid. But
I have a job.
Here's the thing. How can they call themselves progressives when they keep saying that nothing has progressed? Then it's on them.
Her biggest mistake was thinking Joe Rogan, the guy who can host astrophysicists, M&A champions, tech nerds, and conspiracy theorists all in the same week, would be rattled by a scolding tone and a few raised eyebrows. Instead, she poked a bear that's handled more debates than Sunny's had segments that didn't involve quoting herself. So what did Rogan do? He took her claims apart with surgical precision. No theatrics, no shouting, just calm, clinical focus. It was like watching a bomb squad carefully defuse a balloon. By the time he was done, all that was left of Sunny's argument was confetti and regret. She accused him of spreading misinformation, and he answered with an avalanche of facts. Harsh, relentless, inconvenient facts, the kind that make cable hosts squirm and stare at the teleprompter like it just betrayed them. But while Rogan was playing chess, Gutfeld showed up armed with dodgeballs. He wasn't there to educate, he was there to entertain, and he nailed it. He painted Sunny as the poster child for confusing smugness with intelligence, joked that her argument had more holes than a fishing net dropped into a shark tank, and compared The View to a group chat that went public and never realized it should have stayed private. The audience howled, and the burn marks from that roast were permanent.
Critics say that you make everything about race.
Yeah.
And what's your response to people when they say that?
My response to people is that unfortunately, because of the origins of this country and the original sin of this country, everything is about race. Yeah. And that's just true, right? But if we were a country that could come to grips with our history, accept our history, perhaps pay reparations that are due, and perhaps just stop trying to erase our history.
And as all this chaos unfolded, what did Sunny do? She didn't back down. She doubled down. Exactly what you'd expect from someone who's been fact-checked into oblivion and roasted straight into meme territory. She dropped a follow-up statement, the sequel nobody asked for. This time, she added more nuance, more deflection, and even less real substance. It was like slapping duct tape on a sinking yacht. The funniest part? Her defenders jumped in swinging too, which was downright adorable. Watching pundits spin the spin is like watching kids argue over the last cookie. They whined that Rogan was punching down. They cried that Gutfeld was being mean. But here's the thing. When you fire the first shot, you don't get to complain that the other side brought a cannon. And the bigger picture? This wasn't just a roast. It was a cultural autopsy. That on-air moment wasn't just two guys clapping back. It was the collapse of the old media fantasy that they're the gatekeepers of truth. That illusion has been dying for years, but Sunny's blunder threw a Molotov cocktail on the pile and shouted, "Let's see what burns." Rogan represents the messy, unpredictable decentralization of discourse, raw, blunt, and brutally honest. Gutfeld embodies the political gesture, the one who makes you laugh while still landing a point that stings. And Sunny, she's the fading gasp of a media empire built on condescension and carefully packaged outrage.
I saw you on The View. They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies-infested henhouse.
The fallout from this fiasco wasn't just a few memes or nervous chuckles. It was a real shakeup. Viewers who once tuned into The View out of habit suddenly started asking why they were being lectured like kids stuck in a boring university seminar. Meanwhile, Rogan's audience soared, Gutfeld's ratings spiked, and Sunny, she probably sat through the next taping pretending none of it ever happened. But the question remains, how long can a show like The View survive in a world that moves faster, thinks sharper, and laughs harder at its own absurdity? Here's the ultimate irony. Sunny tried to paint Rogan as too influential, too unfiltered, and too dangerous. But in the process, she revealed just how powerless her own voice has become. If Rogan is a cultural threat, then Sunny is the town crier yelling at clouds for raining without her permission. If Gutfeld is the clown, he's the one running the circus she didn't even realize she was standing in. There's a strange satisfaction in watching a high horse collapse under the weight of its own ego. Sunny thought she was marching onto the moral high ground, only to discover the bridge beneath her was made of paper. And Rogan and Gutfeld were already holding the match.
Joy Behar calls her a 10. I mean, how dare she objectify a woman with a sexist rating system, but it's such a typical thing from a 1.5.
Well said.
And just when it seemed the spectacle couldn't get any bigger, people started asking the hard questions. What if this becomes the new normal? What if every time The View throws shade, someone outside their echo chamber fires back, with receipts, wit, and a bigger audience? What happens when the daytime rulers are exposed wearing robes stitched from recycled talking points? Let's be real. This wasn't just a loss. It was a total demolition. Rogan showed that raw ideas, even controversial ones, can crush carefully scripted narratives. Gutfeld proved that humor is the deadliest weapon when the establishment has forgotten how to laugh. And Sunny? She showed that moral superiority without self-awareness is just a dressed-up way of saying, I don't get why no one's clapping. Will this shake things up at The View? Probably not. They'll keep sipping tea, clutching pearls, and pretending democracy is under threat from a guy with a podcast and another with a punchline. But outside that insulated studio bubble, the audience saw it clearly. A date isn't about being loud. It's about being sharp, fearless, and yes, sometimes hilarious.
The end of time. You're right. Anytime she says something stupid, I'm going to go, slave owner! Kat, I just watched that. That's the second time I've watched that. She was tipped off beforehand, right? Because they had to tell her before, so she had time to regroup. They wouldn't just surprise. Really? You think? No?
I don't know. I feel like.
So now the big question lingers. What's next? Will Sunny fire off another passive-aggressive rebuttal that quietly gets ratiated into oblivion on social media? Will The View finally bring in a guest who actually challenges their narrative instead of nodding along like a human soundbite? Will Joe Rogan invite Sunny onto his podcast for a 3-hour grilling while the internet watches with popcorn and memes? Or maybe Gutfeld will just send her a gift basket labeled, "Nice try." Because this wasn't just a one-off clash. It was a glimpse of what happens when the old guard meets the unfiltered new, when polished scripts crumble against authentic voices, and when humor, logic, and unapologetic truth smash through castle walls built from smugness and scripted applause. If this moment had a soundtrack, it would be Rogan calmly asking questions, Gutfeld hitting punchlines like drum strikes, and Sunny frantically shuffling her note cards, wondering how it all went wrong. One thing is clear, the tides are turning. Audiences aren't buying legacy media's stale product anymore. They're tuning out, looking for spaces that are less filtered, more fearless, and infinitely more honest.
Do you see what Whoopi Goldberg said?
What'd she say?
Whoopi Goldberg said that Biden could arrest all the Republicans and put them in jail. You just need to see how unhinged this kind of thinking is. Well, you know what Joe Biden could do? Joe Biden, you have to see it because it's so
on TV.
crazy.
She said it's
on television.
And if Sunny Hostin thought she could steer the conversation from her cushioned seat of power, she got a brutal wake-up call. The real conversation is happening outside that studio, and it's louder, sharper, and way funnier. The real question now, will The View ever figure out how to host an actual debate without turning it into a 5-way shouting match wedged between commercials for anti-aging cream? Can they have a grown-up conversation without treating any dissenting voice like a contagious disease? And then there's the unlikely dream team, Rogan and Gutfeld. Was this just a one-time roast, or the start of an unstoppable duo, the philosopher and the jester? Because if these two keep teaming up, no one in the media bubble is safe. They didn't just clap back. They handed out a blueprint for the ultimate takedown. Facts in one hand, jokes in the other, and zero tolerance for smug nonsense. If Sunny dares to fire back, she'll need more than recycled outrage, because the rematch, that one could be televised for the world to watch.